Hello everyone, I'm the Saxy Gamer. Today we're here for a guide to cultural city-states, the first video in a series of videos that I'm going to be doing on the various city-states in Civilization 6, where I'm going to talk about the various suzerain bonuses that you can acquire from these city-states and how you should go about dealing with these city-states in any games that you may happen to run into. Obviously, first up, we're going to be starting with the cultural city-states, just because that's kind of like what I felt like doing first. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into things and start with talking about what the Envoy Effects are from your cultural city-states in Civ 6. So much like with all of the other types of city-states, you will receive bonuses from a city-state when you have either 1, 3, or 6 envoys in that city-state, and upon reaching 3 envoys, you are also eligible for suzerainship of the city-state, as long as you have 2 more envoys than the next highest player does. The effects of envoys on city-states are different in the base game of Civ 6 than what they are in the expansion, so I am going to go ahead and talk about both just for those people that may still be playing on the base game of Civ. So for the base game, whenever you have 1 envoy in a cultural city-state, you will receive +2 culture in the capital. This is particularly good in the early game whenever you happen to be the first one that meets a city-state, because if you're the first one to meet a city-state, you get 1 free envoy, so you get 2 culture free in your capital, which makes it very easy to get towards those starting civics and can give you a decent boost if you're able to first meet a cultural city-state or 2. At 3 envoys, you will receive +2 culture in every theater square district, and at 6 you will also receive +2 additional culture in every theater square district. This is a very important bonus, and I understand why they changed it. We'll talk about the change in a little bit here, but this is very good because this gets applied to the adjacency bonus of every theater square district, which means that it can be multiplied by a factor of 2 if you run the policy card that gives you +100% theater square adjacency bonuses. So if you're playing the base game of Civ 6 and you're going for a culture victory, I would definitely try to get as many envoys in cultural city-states as you possibly can, because being able to double those bonuses with the policy card can get you an additional 8 culture in each of your theater square districts, which is a pretty significant amount. In the expansions, though, things are a little bit different. You still receive the +2 culture in the capital with 1 envoy, which is still equally as good as it was in the base game, obviously, because it hasn't changed. But the difference here is that at 3 and 6 envoys, you receive that +2 culture in every amphitheater and archaeological museum, respectively. This unfortunately does mean that you can no longer utilize the policy card that doubles your theater square adjacency bonuses in conjunction with this with the envoy bonuses, because they are no longer applied to the adjacency bonus of the districts themselves. What you can do instead is you can utilize the policy card that gives you additional culture from the buildings in the districts, so you'll get +50% from having a population of 10 or higher in the city, and an additional +50% if you have a adjacency bonus of at least +3. It should be noted, though, that these requirements are much more difficult to fulfill than just getting a straight up +100% bonus in all of your districts, your theater square districts, so this was a little bit of a nerf in the expansions, but I honestly don't think it's a bad thing, because it was kind of cheese how easy it was to get a ton of culture from running that 1 policy card and having a few envoys. So if you are going for a culture victory, I would say that it is wise to try to get as many 3 and 6 envoy cultural city-states as you possibly can, because the benefits do stack up. So if you do have maybe 2 cultural city-states in the game and you have 3 envoys in both, that means you will get an additional +4 culture in all of your amphitheater districts, which does add up quite nicely if you have a lot of theater squares and thus a lot of amphitheaters as well. If you're not going for a culture victory, I would still advise maybe, getting some envoys in at least 1 cultural city-state, just because culture is very important for getting you through the civic tree, and without that little extra boost, then you can easily fall behind in your civics, and that's really not good for no matter what victory type you're going for, because civics unlock things that you need for pretty much every victory type except for really religious. So you don't have to strongly prioritize putting envoys in cultural city-states if you're not going for culture victory, but if you have a few extra envoys laying around, it is always a good idea to do so, because it still may be beneficial no matter what victory you're going for. Now let's go ahead and talk about the individual cultural city-states that are found in Civilization 6 and talk about the suzerain bonuses that they provide. So just as a quick reminder, to become the suzerain of a city-state, you have to have at least 3 envoys in that city-state, and you also have to have 2 more envoys than the next highest player does. Once you have these requirements satisfied, you will become the suzerain of the city-state, and you will gain access to their suzerain bonus as well as access to the strategic resources that they have improved in their territory. So the first two city-states that we are going to talk about are Antananarivo and Nan Madol. So Antananarivo will provide you with plus 2% culture for every great person ever earned. This is an incredibly strong city-state and one that can give you an insane amount of extra culture, especially if you're going for a culture victory. So whenever you're going for culture victory, obviously you're going to be recruiting a lot of great writers, great artists, and great musicians, and you're going to get plus 2% additional culture for every one of those that you recruit ever. In addition to any other great people that you may recruit, this can give you an insane boost to your culture yield because for one, it is percentage based, and two, it is, it's permanent throughout the entire game, which is incredibly strong. It's very easy to get, an additional 20 or even 40% extra culture added on to your culture output by Antananarivo, and this makes it probably the single strongest cultural city-state in the game. Nan Madol, on the other hand, is not quite as strong. It makes it so that your districts on or adjacent to the coast will provide plus 2 culture. The big thing that this applies to is really your city centers, because your city centers do count as districts, so they will receive that additional plus 2 culture. Aside from that, harbors can be good for this because harbors are pretty much always going to be on or adjacent to coast tiles, well, obviously because you can only place them on coast tiles. So those will always provide plus 2 culture as well, but aside from that, I don't find Nan Madol to be particularly useful just because then it limits you to, one, you have to settle on the coast to get that bonus, and settling on the coast is not as beneficial as it is to settle on fresh water because you don't get as much housing, and if you're going to place districts on the coast, then that means that you might have to sacrifice other adjacency bonuses unless you have particularly good adjacency bonus spots on the coast already. So for those reasons, I'm not a huge fan of Nan Madol. The next two we're going to talk about are Kumasi and Rapa Nui. So Kumasi makes it so that your trade routes to city-states provide plus 2 culture and plus 1 gold for each district in the origin city. I kind of view Kumasi as a better version of Nan Madol because it really doesn't limit you to where you're going to settle or where you're placing your districts. All that matters is that you have districts down in the city and that, you have a trade route that you're able to send to a city-state. So really, it gives you pretty equivalent bonuses to Nan Madol, except it only costs you 1 trade route instead of forcing you to, play in a particular way, such as settling on the coast or putting your districts on the coast. So for those reasons, I do quite like Kumasi, and the other nice thing is that if you have a lot of districts in a city, so maybe you have a really high population city that has 4 or 5 districts, obviously that would get you 10 culture or 8 or 10 culture per trade route. If you want to effectively double that bonus, you could just get another trade route in that city and double the bonus that you're getting from Kumasi, because really, you're able to stack it up as much as you can. So if you have one city like that is in trade range of 4 city-states, you could get an insane amount of culture. So I do think that Kumasi is quite a strong city-state. Rapa Nui is up next, and it unlocks the Moai unique tile improvement, which will provide culture. It gives you plus 1 as a base, plus 1 for every 2 adjacent Moai, plus 1 if adjacent to coast or lake, and plus 2 if on or adjacent to volcanic soil. Long story short with the Moai, I really don't think it's good at all. I think it's actually pretty bad, just because of the opportunity cost of placing it down on a tile. That means that you can't put any other improvements on that tile, and the bonuses you get from it really are not that good, especially considering the fact that you have to work those tiles to get that culture off of them as well. So for those reasons, I generally tend to avoid Rapa Nui. The last two that we're going to talk about are Mohenjo-Daro and Vilnius. So Mohenjo-Daro makes it so that coastal water acts as fresh water in terms of housing bonus, and I think that this is really strong if either A, you have a situation where you don't have a lot of fresh water sources on your continent, or B, if you're playing a naval civilization. So getting the ability to use, to get higher housing on your coastal cities is quite nice, because higher housing means that you can get more population, which means more yields and more districts, because obviously you're going to be working more tiles as well. So this bonus is, I think a lot of people actually underrate Mohenjo-Daro, but I think that if you are playing like in any game, just having Mohenjo-Daro kind of opens up the door towards giving a lot more good city spots, because you won't be limited towards needing to settle on strictly fresh water sources. Vilnius is a bit of an interesting one. I don't have the base game suzerain bonus listed here, but I will talk on it about it briefly. So in the base game, it will provide you, whenever you enter a new era, you will receive a free inspiration from that era. Long story short, I think that this is just terrible. It's not much of a bonus, and it only, comes every once in a while, so I think it's a pretty bad suzerain bonus in the base game. Luckily, they changed this in the expansions, though. So in the expansions, for each level of your highest alliance, you will receive plus 50% adjacency bonus towards your theater squares. So this is an ability that confuses people a lot. So really, if you think about it, think of what your highest alliance level is, and then if it's level 1, then you'll receive plus 50% to all your theater square adjacency bonus. Level 2, you'll receive plus 100%, you know, etc., etc. So Vilnius is a city-state that I think is situationally strong, but not always. Obviously, if you're playing someone like the Greeks that can naturally get pretty high adjacency bonuses on their theater squares, or I mean more so their Acropoli just because of who they are, then Vilnius can be quite strong because getting that additional adjacency bonus can give you a lot of extra culture. If you don't happen to have particularly good adjacency bonuses on your theater squares, though, then I think that Vilnius is pretty bad. Their effectiveness drops down significantly, and I don't think that they're really worth keeping around very often. As far as how these city-states should affect your gameplay in a given game of Civilization 6, really there are two options for what you have in terms of dealing with them. One is that you can keep them and try to become their suzerain, and two is that you can take them over because city-states often do have a good amount of land and, you know, they already are a pre-developed city, so taking them over can be quite beneficial to you. I should say that if you are going for a cultural city, then I would recommend keeping all of the cultural city-states that you can in the game, because getting the bonus from their envoys to your amphitheaters and your museums is pretty valuable, and it can give you a huge boost to your culture output, because you'll probably have a lot of those buildings, and thus it stacks up quite a bit. For all the other victory types, though, I'm going to go and touch on which ones I generally like to keep and which ones I generally like to kill. So, for the ones that I like to keep, you can probably guess them already, but they're Antananarivo and Kumasi, just because of how strong their bonuses are and how you can get a lot out of them for not doing very much. You know, you don't have to really put in much effort towards doing so, and you can get a good culture boost that helps you get through the civic tree nice and fast. For the ones that I pretty much always will kill whenever I'm not going for a culture victory, I'm going to go with Nan Madol and Rapa Nui. Both of them, I think, they force you to change up your playstyle too much, or, you know, with Rapa Nui, they have too high of an opportunity cost by sacrificing tiles to get a little bit of culture that I really just don't think they're worth it. In pretty much every scenario, I would say that just having the land from the city is actually much more valuable. The two that I didn't put in any of those categories are Mohenjo-Daro and Vilnius, because really it definitely depends on the game. So Mohenjo-Daro can be incredibly helpful even if you're not going for culture victory, because that can get you a lot of extra housing if you have to settle coastally, which is useful for any victory type because it allows you to build up those cities quite a bit more. For Vilnius, if you're not going for culture victory, I would probably take over Vilnius unless you happen to have like really good theater square adjacency bonuses. So I still listed it as a maybe, though, because even if you are going for a culture victory, Vilnius is not always particularly useful, because if you don't have high theater square adjacency bonuses, then Vilnius doesn't really provide that much. So that's why Mohenjo-Daro and Vilnius are on the maybe lists. And now, just because everybody likes a good ranking list, I'm going to go ahead and rank the cultural city-states in the ones that I think are the best to worst. So here's my list right here. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I've already discussed these city-states pretty in-depth in the past, you know, like 10 minutes. But if I had to give a list and rank each of them, this is what it would be. I should note that obviously this list is not perfectly comprehensive because there is a bit of situationality that goes into every single game of Civ that might make some of these city-states better or worse depending on what situations you have, so take the list with a grain of salt, but I think generally it does quite accurately capture the general quality of the city-states. So Antananarivo is definitely the best of the cultural city-states and arguably one of the best city-states in the game, and Rapa Nui is definitely pretty bad in almost all cases. This has been a quick guide to the cultural city-states in Civilization 6. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If you're looking to pick up either Civ 6 or any of its DLC, or any of a number of strategy games, feel free to check out my game store linked in the video description below. It's a great way to pick up games while supporting the channel as well. Another way to support the channel is to become a channel member via the join button that is just below the video, so if that's something that you're interested in, I would highly encourage that you do so. So thank you everyone for watching. I have been the Saxy Gamer. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you're looking for more Civilization 6 content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.